Every idea has to start somewhere, and for this set of Fireplace tools, it starts with a slit-drifted hole in the handle and evolves from there. Now, this is not an original idea. I've seen lots of versions of this over the years. This is just the version that I saw in my head at this particular time. I want to go ahead and turn this into a set of tools with a stand. I'm starting with a piece of 1/2 by 1, so it's about 13 millimeters by 25 millimeters. And this is just a little over 15 inches long, so about 390 millimeters. The first thing I want to do is upset one end so I get that flare on the end of the handle. With the handle roughed out, I want to go ahead and punch a hole in this handle, and that serves two purposes really. The main one is aesthetic. It's just for looks. I think it adds some interest to the piece, but it also gives some place you can hang this from. I'm going to go ahead and lay this out and center punch from both sides to mark the hole so I can get it right where I want it. And that mark will index one end of a slot punch to create this hole. Now I want to draw out the shank of the tool, leaving a mass at the end for the actual tool, and then I'll come back and finish the handle. Now what I want to do to the handle at this point is clean up this flare and the upset at the end, And I want this to be a little bit more dramatic than it is now, and I want it a lot cleaner and crisper than it is. So I'll probably start by going to the grinder and cleaning it up a little bit in profile. But then I want to fuller in at least 3 places and leave some very distinct and hopefully very even fuller marks on this. Got our fingers crossed that it comes out that way. And I kind of picture a tool that pinches it this way, so it's a spring fuller type thing. Except I don't think it's all that convenient to work end to end. You could, and if you had a striker and did this, it wouldn't be that bad. But under a power hammer or treadle hammer, that's really awkward. So I'm going to make a new spring fuller at a right angle. And for that, I've got 38 inches of 1/2 inch round bar. I've got it marked in the middle. I'll get that hot, bend it in a U shape, shape the bow portion of it, and then I'll bend the end of it and clean that up and see what I need to do with that to make it work the way I want it to. I'm going to take this to the belt grinder and taper the ends a little bit so that it doesn't have a sharp transition in this fuller mark. And that's a great opportunity to remind you that Black Bear Forge is sponsored by Combat Abrasives. Use the link in the video description and the coupon code BLACKBEAR10 for discount on your order. Now this is just made out of mild steel, which is perfectly fine for a tool that won't see a lot of use, and for one that's somewhat experimental. I may find that this doesn't do what I want it to. There may be a little bit of tweaking and adjusting with the handle to get everything just right. But before I get to that point, I want to go ahead and do the poker end. I'll do the final adjustments after both tools are done so I can get everything the same length and get them to look right. We've looked in the past at splitting this, which works very well. But today I'm going to do something a little bit different. I'm going to use some half-face blows to offset the poker end at the far side of the anvil, then come to the near side of the anvil with some more half-face blows, leaving a mass here that has not been thinned out. That will be drawn out then into a relatively short hook for this poker. Looks like I probably left a little bit too much material for the point on this. It'll work fine as a poker, but it may look just a little bit unbalanced. If necessary, we'll either come back and trim it, or worst case, we make another one. I think I'll trim quite a bit off this point and see how I like the proportions with that shorter. That actually came out pretty much just what I was looking for, so I just left too much material for the end, and I think that hook is just fine. So now I think I will turn my attention to the shovel. This is actually a little bit backwards. I think if you start with the shovel, it's easier to make the poker length match the shovel length than it is to make the shovel length match the poker length. But we're going to do the best we can. I've been messing around with ideas for how to create the mass on this shovel for a little while, and I think I've come up with the idea that I like the most. That's going to use the same handle design, but instead of starting off with the 1/2x1 material, I'm starting with 1/2x2 material and then drawing out most of it to the 1/2x1, leaving 1/2x2 down here to draw the shovel out of it. I think that's going to be an easier way to go. Don't know, I haven't actually tried it this way yet. And I end up with a lot more handle material that I need. So I'm going to use this piece that I've started but not finished making a handle just to get a size off of so we can make the handle very close to the same length as the poker handle. I'm going to go ahead and draw out the shank on the shovel here and make sure that's about the right size before I go back and refine the handle. It's always going to need a little bit of tweaking and adjusting, and we need to do that scalloped flare at the end. Drawing this out is really pretty easy under the power hammer, but if you don't have a power hammer, this might be a good way to incorporate forge welding a larger mass for the handle into a smaller shank for the tool, and then a sheet metal pan that you can rivet on at the end. There's always some tweaking and adjusting to do here. And even after you're sure you're done and you look at it later, you'll say, oh, that could go this way or that way a little bit. I'm going to start the stand with 2 pieces of that same 1/2x1 material. I cut these about 26 inches long. It's around 660 millimeters long. The critical thing is that you make sure your tools fit and that they're not sitting on the floor while they're hanging in the stand. I'm going to use a lot of similar elements and techniques on these that I have on the tool handles. It's going to get that same flare on the top. It's going to get slit and drifted holes for the joinery. But I'm not going to do a lot of tapering on this. I think that might get to be a little bit too much of the same thing. And I want the tool handles to stand out and be the showpiece of this. So this is just to complement the tools, not distract from the tools. Most of this is just done with short isolated heats, so you don't need a real big long heat on this. So I think a torch would be a good way to go, or in my case, I'm going to use the induction torch. I'm going to perform the same step to each bar and then progress to the next step. And that way I can keep everything a little bit more consistent. But I'm only going to show 1 bar since they'll both be identical. I do like to knock the corners off the bar and soften the edges a little bit. That would have been easier done before I worried about any of this other stuff. But we can still fix it. Next thing I need to do is put a tenon on the other end of this bar so that we can mortise it into the feet. I'm letting this upset in both directions so I have a nice big shoulder when I set that tenon and hold it to the feet. It should make for a more stable stand that way. I want just enough of a score line in this so it indexes cleanly with the butcher's under the guillotine tool. That makes it a lot easier to get the tenon exactly where I want it. As always, the process will be the same for both uprights, both tenons. Just make sure you get everything exactly the same length and do your final check when the bars are cooled back down to room temperature, because steel expands when it's hot, contracts when it cools back down. So if you measure these, well, one of them is hot and one of them is cool, and they're the same then, they're not going to be the same size when they're both cool. And if you're interested in the square monkey tool, I'll link to a video where we made this right over here. The feet for the stand are made from the same material, and they need a punch drifted hole that matches the 1/2-inch square tenon on the upright. I went ahead and took the time to make a jig for the fly press that will bend these feet so I can get all 4 feet bent exactly the same. And that way this stand should sit nice and even. At least that's my idea. And this is just welded up out of material that I happen to have. It's 1-inch bar on the bottom, 1-inch bar on the top, so it forms an offset of 1 inch. For the crossbar, I'm going with a 3/8 tenon. I think the last thing to do before assembly is to punch a hole for the lower bar, and then we'll be ready to see if it all fits. I was lucky enough to have some great big rivets in my stash of nuts and bolts. These are going to be the perfect little pin to hang the tools on. I don't need a head on both sides, just one side, partially because it looks better with a head, but also the other side where the tool hangs, if I head it, there's nothing to hang the tool on. So I think what I'm going to do is just heat this up just ahead of the head, put it in the hole, and upset the shank just enough to swell and kind of lock that in. This isn't structural, it's just a pin to hang the tools on. And of course they lean opposite. That means that I'm dropping my hammer hand a little bit as I swing, which makes sense because this is higher, so my hammer comes in at an angle. So that'll take a little tweaking with the torch, but I think I can straighten it. I threaded the round tenon on the lower bar so that I can put a nut on here and hold the whole thing together while I'm doing the assembly. I'm going to set this in front of the forge door and hopefully it will get hot enough to melt some paste wax onto it.